So the question I'll be answering today is how I use reflective practice to improve my OT process. Predominantly the area I've been working in of the CPPF was the intervention stage, and I'll be using Gibbs' model of reflection to guide my thought process. So when working with Gary, one of the main issues I had difficulty in overcoming was my ability to probe Gary to evaluate his performance in cooking and also in his household chores. For this reflection, I'll be focusing on the cooking aspect. And during cooking, Gary was observed to be quite unsafe. He was often overreaching and also twisting at the trunk, which decreased his balance and therefore increased his likelihood of having a fall. Also, Gary didn't plan out his meal and therefore would go back and forth from the cupboard getting different items and wouldn't work in a sequential order. So when we had discussions after the cooking, I suppose I was trying to help Gary to explore his performance, and how I felt reflecting on that and how I felt about it was I felt quite unaccomplished and annoyed at myself because I wasn't in the initial stages able to help Gary explore his performance, and I wasn't able to use that cognitive rehabilitation approach. I suppose the factors that impacted on this were Gary's cognitive deficits, so his concrete thinking, so he wasn't able to see information from a different person's perspective. His lack of insight, so he wasn't able to evaluate his own performance. He wasn't able to see where he was having difficulties and where he wasn't, and also his difficulties in generating ideas. So it was quite hard to get him to think about what he could do next. As well as the other factor that was really impacting on this was also my lack of experience when working with this clientele group and also in cognitive rehabilitation. If it had been somebody who was quite experienced, it would have had a bit more of a different outcome. So during those initial stages and the initial sessions, should I say, I ended up giving Gary quite a lot of ideas that I thought he could improve on, and due to the concrete thinking Gary had, he had a lot of trouble seeing those ideas and seeing my point of view and perspective. So I felt like I wasn't accomplishing anything, and I wasn't also using that cognitive rehabilitation approach, which is fundamental to the setting. That is why clients access this service. So I suppose what I took away from that was that I needed to change my approach because of those factors, because of my lack of experience and his cognitive deficits when working with Gary. So what I did was I talked with different members on the team about their ways of engaging with Gary and how I could better explore issues. So what I was able to do was I was able to focus on one specific issue for each session. So for one session it would be about overreaching and different ways of which we could change the environment or change his performance in order to decrease his amount of overreaching. And what we did, I think this was a lot more effective, being able to explore one issue rather than all the issues at one time. And also the other factor was that I stopped giving ideas and was really just taking an active listening role and asking those probing questions and not feeling like I had to come up with an answer. So I suppose changing my approach allowed me to work in that cognitive rehabilitation sort of setting.